Okay, now we're going to go through the procedure for receiving a marine delivery, marine transfer. So prior to the arrival of the barge, we need to make sure everything is in place and secure. The first thing to do is to review all the required government documents, the Coast Guard Operations Manual, the Facility Response Plan, make sure we understand the requirements for the facility, make sure we have those documents in place in case somebody needs to inspect them. Then you'd want to review all your spill response equipment, make sure it's in place, it's secure. You want to check your secondary containment area and remove all the storm water. Then we'd want to make a thorough inspection of the piping and all of the equipment and the tanks, similar to the monthly inspection. And we'll start that inspection down at the marine header, where will be the interface between our shoreside personnel and the barge delivery personnel. Okay, we're going to begin our inspection at the marine header. These are the connection points where the barge will connect their hose, so we're just make sure they're still capped until the barge arrives. Again, check all the valving, look for any evidence of any leaks from any of the flange joints or from the valves. It's a good idea at this time to check the valves, make sure they operate freely. If a valve is kind of stiff, these ones are equipped with a Zerk fitting. We might want to grease the valve prior to the arrival, and then make sure these valves are closed before the connection. Also, we want to check, make sure our secondary containment, our drip pan is in place underneath the connection. Check it to make sure there's no storm water in it. If there is, drain it off. If there's any drippage, we'd want to remove any sheen or any oily residue with sorbent pads. Make sure this is empty so we have our full capacity, and that the drain valve on it is closed or the plug is in place, so we're ready for receiving fuel. Then we would go and inspect the piping all the way from the marine header into the tank farm and perform a thorough inspection of all of the piping within the tank farm, all the valves, all the connections to the tanks prior to the arrival of the barge. Also, in addition to a visual inspection of the piping system, the annual hydrostatic pressure test needs to be performed of all the marine delivery piping prior to the barge arrival. A copy of inspection test needs to be included in the documents as part of your records. Okay, the next test that needs to be completed prior to arrival of the barge is the inventory and preparation of the quantities of fuel to be taken on. So what you want to do is take gauge readings on every tank, and you want to actually manually check the tank with the dip stick or a plumb bob and verify that the gauges are reading properly prior to the delivery. Also use a water cut paste. If there's any water in the tanks, you may want to remove that prior to the delivery. So once we've made our measurements and our readings of the tanks, then we want to go to our tank capacity charts. Verify the existing quantity of fuel in each tank, and then verify the quantity of fuel we want to put into each tank. From that, we would then develop a receiving plan. How many gallons of which product we're going to pump into each tank, and it's a good idea to even do an order of delivery. We're going to start with tank 1, how many gallons go into tank 1, tank 2, and etc. on down. So prior to the arrival of the barge, we know exactly how much fuel we're going to put into each tank. Okay, upon arrival of the barge at the site, the first thing that will happen is a meeting will be conducted between the barge personnel and the tank farm facility personnel. They will go over a declaration of inspection form. This is a checklist that gives all the requirements that need to be in place for safety and preparedness prior to beginning the operation. A copy of this form is included in the above ground storage tank operator's handbook. Okay, after the barge personnel have made their hose connection, they will pressure test the hoses up to the point of connection to our marine header. Once that has been accomplished and they're satisfied with the pressure test, then we'll open the main valve and we're ready to begin the fuel transfer. Okay, so we'll open this valve. Once that's in place, then we'll go up to the tank farm, go to the first tank that we're going to receive fuel at, and then begin the fuel transfer. After the pressure test has been complete, the valve's been opened, the tank farm personnel will go into the tank farm ready to start the procedure. Throughout the whole marine delivery procedure, they will have two-way radio communication with the barge personnel. When the barge personnel signal that they're ready, then the tank farm person will open the valve on the first tank to receive fuel. Once this has been accomplished, he will then let the barge personnel know the valve is open. They will begin pumping at a slow rate. Once everything has been checked and everything's working thoroughly, they'll bring the rate up to the normal pumping rate. Then we'll just have a continuous monitoring of the whole process while this tank is being filled. During the process, the pipeline and the hoses should be inspected, walked periodically, and the tank level should be monitored continuously throughout this. As the tank begins to reach its full level, and you want to check your operations manual and your plan for receiving fuel, it'll either be typically 90% or maybe 95% on a larger bulk tank. As you begin to near that level of the shutoff, you want to signal the barge personnel to slow down the pumping rate. Watch it very closely. When we get to the predetermined full level, then you would shut the valve on this tank, close and lock the valve. And we'll let the barge personnel know that that valve has been shut, and we'll go to the next tank. Then we'll just follow the exact same procedure for each tank in order of the receiving plan until all the tanks have been filled. And upon completion of the fill, we want to make sure that all the valves are closed and locked. After completion of the transfer, you go back to the marine header and close the gate valve at the marine header. After this has been closed, then the barge personnel will drain and remove their hose. Once they've completed that operation, then we would want to replace our cap and secure the marine header. Upon completion of the marine delivery, you want to wait a day to allow the product in the tanks to settle. This lets any water that may have gotten in settle. Then after that period, you'd want to get on top of the tanks again and use your plumb bob or your dipstick and manually gauge the tanks with a water cut paste. Verify your clock gauge readings, make sure that you got all of the product that you were billed for, and check any water that you may have received in the delivery. And again, if you received water, you may want to drain that off. Some of the facilities are not on a large enough body of water to receive a barge delivery. In these cases, the delivery is often by airplane, sometimes by fuel truck. The basic ideas that we just went through on the marine delivery procedure still apply. The idea is safety and preventing spills and overfills. Be sure to look at your procedures and maintenance manual for your facility to get the exact specific requirements before receiving an air or truck delivery of fuel.